And good evening, everyone. And it's loud. I'm gonna have to tune that a little bit. So, good evening, everyone. Good evening to those of you online joining us. Just a quick um, mention. Ardmore, where Brother Robert is preaching in revival, actually is streaming their services. So if I get too boring, or those of you online, or you guys in the crowd, even if I get too boring, you guys can go and switch over to that as well. He's been doing a good job. I don't know who's doing music, but they have a good praise team as well. So we are going to be in a couple different passages. We're going to start in Second Corinthians. We're going to read a little bit where Paul is trying to preach to the church in Corinth about how we should look at the way we go about not only our ministry and day-to-day lives, but how we should be confident in that we've reconciled our soul with what Jesus did on the cross. We should keep that front of mind whenever we're not only just doing the day-to-day things like I mentioned, but being tested, being tempted, but also going through our trials and our tribulations, because not everything is a test, not everything is a temptation, but there are things that we encounter in this world that aren't necessarily good or beneficial to us, right? There's a lot of hard things that we go through, and I mentioned it the last time we just briefly mentioned it as Native people, as an Indian church, right? As Native people, our ancestors went through a lot to be able for us to be here today, right? So keep that in mind when we're talking about this. We're going to read out of chapter 5 in 2 Corinthians. It says, "So we are always confident and know that while we are at home in the body, we are away from the Lord. For we walk by faith and not by sight, and we are confident and satisfied to be out of the body and at home with the Lord. Therefore, whether we are at home or away, we must make it our aim to be pleasing to Him. For we must all appear before the tribunal of Christ, so that each may be repaid for what he has done in the body, whether good or worthless." I think the King James terms that whether it be good or evil, right? There's no gray area when we make a choice on our actions and our activities. It's either good or bad. And again, like I said, everything that we experience in the world, it comes at us in those two shapes, in those two forms. It's either good for us, it benefits us, or it's bad for us, and it might torment us, right? Might hurt us, might be agony, right? When we experience the passing of our friends and our family and our relatives, right? That's not a good time for us. Even though we know, if we truly believe in our Lord God and what He's done, right? They are at home. What Paul is trying to convey to the church right here, that they're at home with the Lord, waiting on Him. But for us, because we miss them, maybe we just seen them. This season is a little bit tough for me personally, because we're getting ready to enter a time where 20 years ago there was a lot going on. I could almost write a country song on how much things were going on. I lost my cat. I'm a cat guy. I'm not a dog guy. Even though I want some big German shepherds to guard my house, I had a cat for 9 years, and I lost him. I lost my girlfriend, and then later on, my brother and my father passed away. My father was taken in a car wreck 10 days after my brother took his life. He completed suicide. And so within a 2-week span, well, it was more like, for me personally, again, like I said, it was like 2 months, but for like a 2-week span, my family was changed, was hurt, pretty bad. And it wasn't a good accident the way my father went. But I knew after all that God had taken care of me, carried me through that. I remember bits and pieces that were going on, the different things that were going on at the time. But a lot of the detail, like the minor details, what I was wearing, where I exactly was during those times, it's kind of blurry. After my brother had passed away, I wanted to go off by myself to go do some shopping for myself. There was a big event that me and my brother had planned on attending in the summertime. It was called Oklahoma D-Day, and it was a big paintball event. There was like 10,000 people. At its height, there was 4,400 paintball players actually on the field in this. It was like a mile and a half by a couple hundred yards, big old. What they did, they reenacted the landing or the operation. What was it called? Operation Overlord. It was the landing at the beach with the Allied forces against the German forces, but it was all paintball gun. It was fun, and we had been getting ready for that. We had needed some gear and everything. Well, after you did that, I still needed to prepare, and it was a way to get my mind off things. So I wanted to go off. My mom didn't want to let me, and my dad, had to intervene there because she was scared. Rightfully so. We were going through a really, really trying time. We just lost my brother to something that was so devastating. Then in hopefully they do something about it. So in the meantime, when I wanted to go and shop for some paintball stuff or whatever, there was a conversation that my dad and my mom had with each other. I don't know the details of it, but my mom didn't want to go, didn't want to lose me, didn't want to have to find me or anything like that. And I had made this trip by myself a lot of times. When I was in the back, I was kind of getting my thoughts together about what I wanted to talk about. I was asking my sister-in-law about her driver's license and how they go about it, because back in those days, like it was a long time ago, 23 years ago, when I got my driver's license, it wasn't all this, you have to get this learner's permit, you have to do all this type of stuff, you have to wait a year, potentially, any of that. I went and took my driver's ed test, I got my learner's permit, or my driver's education course. We had to take a written test or something like that. Then we had to go. And so within a matter of like 2 or 3 months, I had my driver's license from not having anything. Apparently the state of Oklahoma doesn't like that anymore. And so, you have to do all this crazy stuff. It's a year now. It's called a graduated, what did it say? I can't remember. Graduated driver's license process or something like that. So you have to take driver's education, or you have to be with your parent or some other licensed driver. You have to take 50 hours of driving practice, instruction. They have to sign a little form about it and all kinds of stuff. That's a lot. But I had been driving before that. I had been going the back roads, doing other odds and ends and everything like that. And then even after that, before all this had happened, I had driven to Tulsa, I'd driven to Oklahoma City. I drove up to where we were going, in the big old hills up there by Wyandotte and Miami and all them. So it was no big deal for me to go to Tulsa, 71st and Memorial over there by Woodland Hills to go get my gear that I needed. But my mom, her world had changed, and she didn't want to risk me being out there by myself and all that chaos, which is rightfully so. But my dad had to remind her, yes, we are scared. We're in a time right now, but we at some point need to get back to reality. We need to get back from being scared and thinking everything's going to come down all at once, right? Kind of like, what do they call it? Crying wolf, the guy who was kept on crying wolf and saying something bad's going to happen, Well, that's what she was scared of. So we have to be confident. That's what Paul is trying to talk about. Whenever those things happen, we have to remind ourselves that, you know what? Yeah, things are bad right now, but where I'm headed, as long as you believe that, you have to actually believe, you have to actually confess with your mouth that Jesus is our Lord and Savior, that he's going to take care of our soul. Like what we've done in the past, we don't have to worry about anymore because what we're headed towards is something better. But that's what he's talking about. He said, if you don't, he says, therefore, whether we're at home or away, we make it our aim, it's our goal to be pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the tribunal of Christ, so that each may be repaid for what he has done in the body. So there's going to come a time where we have to stand in judgment. We have to stand in a place where God, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit are going to judge us. They're going to judge what we've done here on earth. And it says we must be repaid for what we have done in the body, whether that's good, whether we've done good, whether we've actually, did the things that we were supposed to do, helping God further his mission, spreading the gospel or any of that type of stuff, or just being good in a community sense or a family sense, right? Taking care of our neighbors, taking care of our brothers and sisters, caring for them, caring for our children, caring for the elderly. As Native people, again, we have ways about us that are good ways. A lot of the times we don't like to see our folks end up in old folks' homes. We don't like to, see our kids and being taken care of by other people and those kinds of things and whatnot. We have ways about us because we were brought up a certain way. We have a certain culture about us. And then we have the bad things. Maybe, we stole that piece of gum from underneath the retail counter when we was at, little kid, or maybe we was older, right? If you shoplifted from Walmart, if you did any of those kinds of things, you're going to have to answer for them. I always go back to Brother Junior when he was talking about how he was mean sometimes to animals. he up here, he's confessed to it. He's like, he's going to have to answer for that. He's going to have to stand before the tribunal, which is God, the Holy Spirit, and Jesus. He's going to have to stand up there and answer for what he's done to those animals. I like animals, but, there are pests, there are rodents, they get out in the road and I don't feel sorry for them. But, those activities, maybe it was on down the road and I could have avoided them. I might have to answer for that. And I better have a good excuse, because there's not going to be too many excuses that's going to be accepted by the Lord, right? And that's what he's talking about. Judgment. Judgment is reserved for God, though. It's not for us to really do anything. And we have laws. We have a lot of things. And when I was telling you about what I was going through at the time, it seemed like it was really, really bad. So my brother had did what he did, and I'm not mad at him. I don't carry any weight. I don't carry any sorrow or any guilt for doing what I did, because at the time there was hints. There was clues that were going on. I acted on those clues, so I don't have any remorse. But he left a note, and the note, when you guys are learning about the situation, not that I'm going to share with you guys about it, but when you learn about the situation, it kind of leads you to believe that there was stuff that was left undone, which is the case with a lot of individuals that take that way out of this world. They might be accusing things, they might be saying things, they might just be heartbroken. And one of the things was about driving that he left in that note. It's not heavy or anything like that, but he said, I guess I never really got to drive. So it's probably overrated. Like, no, it's not overrated. Although there are kids these days that don't even want to drive because they have Uber, right? They live in these bigger towns that have Uber, and they don't have to get a car. They don't have to do all these things. They don't have to worry about insurance and all that. All they do is get on their app and they just, pay for a trip to wherever they're trying to head. And then hopefully, we always encourage it with those people that want to go out and party and do all those things, use those taxis and cabs and those ways to get back and forth so you're not endangering other people on the road, right? But in his note, he said, maybe it's overrated. I don't think it was overrated. In fact, I had a job that required me to drive an hour and a half to and from work. I got to work from home, but They gave me a company vehicle. They gave me a company gas card, and it was really cool. But had I not had that experience driving, I wouldn't have been able to do any of that. I don't even know if I would have been able to have the job. So it's not totally overrated, especially in this country when you kind of need it in a lot of deals. But in Matthew, in chapter 7, it's a part of this sermon that Jesus was exhorting to the people. It's called the Sermon on the Mount. So at the tail end of it, it says, beginning in chapter 7, verse 1, it says, "Do not judge so that you won't be judged. For with the judgment you use, you will be judged. And with the measure you use, it will be measured to you." And then he goes on with a really, really good illustration. He says, "Why do you look at the speck in your brother's eye, but don't notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your brother, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' and look, there's a log in your eye? Hypocrite. First take the log out of your eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye." And then he goes on to another illustration. It doesn't really pertain to the topic that we're discussing tonight, but it does lend itself to a little bit of interpretation about judging and what judging entails. Is don't give what is holy to dogs, or toss your pearls before pigs, or they will trample them with their feet, turn and tear you to pieces. And just to touch on that little part right there, right? We don't know what's good for other people because we're not other people. So it's not good to try to give somebody that we think is valuable to them when we have no idea what is valuable to them. And so when we're trying to share or love or do anything for others, it must be in relative, in context to what we're trying to achieve. And so you have to be mindful that you don't give your best when it comes to gifts and all that, what you think is valuable, because they might not like it. In fact, they might take it as an insult, and that's what he's trying to warn you against. He's trying to say, you don't know what's good for others, so to sum it up, basically, give them the gospel. Show them God's love. And that's what he was referring to earlier. When he's talking about judgment, he's saying, don't look at it in your own eyes, in your own perspective, because what's happening in somebody else's world, what's happening in your brother or your relative or your cousin's world might not necessarily be in the same, might not be presented to you in the same way that it's being presented to them. It says, do not judge so that you won't be judged. The funniest example I can think of is when, and it's not a bad thing. It might be termed sexist, but when you see those shorts and those videos about when people mistake women with bellies that they're pregnant, right? And then you see all kinds of funny little deals about that. But that's the point. Appearances on the outside may not be what's happening on the inside, and that goes for every situation, right? If you see a couple of people with, say you're visiting a town and you see a couple people with a couple ski mask or mask outside of a bank and they're holding a bunch of luggage, what's your first thought? They might be trying to rob the place, right? But what if that happened in December, right, in Denver, Colorado? You might not think twice about it because it's cold up there. And they might be, trying to stay out on the streets or whatever. They might not the bank might not even be open, right? There might not be. It might be a Sunday. It might be a Saturday or whatever. So that's what he's trying to warn us about. No, appearances on the outside aren't always what's going on the inside. It says further, he takes it a little bit further. He says, with the judgment you use, you will be judged, and with the measure you use, it will be measured to you, right? So if we was to judge somebody based on appearances on the outside, we can expect then a response, a way of somebody else judging us for the way we appear. And that's why it's always good to be mindful of when you're getting into those situations, when you're wanting to discuss certain things, that you've taken care of your own stuff, that what you're getting ready to talk about, right? That's why it's not even good to even start those kind of conversations in the first place. when you're judging people, it never turns out good. It says the measure you use, right? If we're using things that we've grown up with. So I really like, what's it called? I really like Malt-O-Meal. When I was telling somebody about that, they was like, what's Malt-O-Meal? And I said, I don't know. It's just stuff that you stir up and it's like rice and you do whatever. And people are familiar with the term farina outside of, I guess, Oklahoma or wherever. So farina. And I was like, man, what was you on the struggle? And I was like, no. I was like, I just like a Malt-O-Meal. I don't know what you're talking about. Well, apparently growing up, that was a meal that, people, I guess on not so much income means, would utilize in their meals. That wasn't the case with our family. I just liked it. Our family liked it. Liked putting bananas in it and stuff like that. Man, I had to load mine up with sugar, and apparently that wasn't good either because we had problems with diabetes later on, all that kind of stuff. But the measure that was being used for them wasn't necessarily the same for everybody else that they were using it for. Likewise, when they were talking about not having a car and having to walk everywhere and do all those kinds of things, one might think, well, you didn't have a car, your family didn't have a car. Was you guys on the struggle? What'd you guys do? See, it gets into a not a good realm about doing those things. And that's the illustration that he's trying to use when he's talking about the speck in somebody else's eye and then the log in your own. He goes into much more detail about how we should look at those things, right? Instead of judging somebody about their appearance and those other things, we should, once we've recognized that we're about to talk about judging somebody or about saying something about an illustration, he actually goes into detail, really, really good detail, and says, let's take care of our own situation first. Why am I putting that perspective on there? Is it because I'm really about to struggle with something, or if I struggled in the past and I need to fix something, right? So let's fix that situation before we start trying to help others. And that is gold. That's a piece of gold, a little nugget of gold wisdom right there that Jesus is trying to exhort to not only the people that was listening to his Sermon on the Mount, but the people today that are reading the Bible. He says, take care of your own situations before you start trying to go out and help others. Even though it's not going to be perceived as helping, right? When we go out and we try to judge people, it's not always out of malice. It's not out of ill will or bad intent, right? Sometimes we're trying to just make an observation and be like, well, maybe you can improve your situation a little bit. It's never received that way, right? Who's ever said something to somebody and said, and in a judgmental way, they take it on and it's positive. It's a positive situation. Hardly anybody, right? Even if we're trying to give constructive criticism, I always like that word, constructive criticism. If you guys kids need to listen, unless somebody asks for constructive criticism, unless they're genuinely ready to listen to you, don't give it, because they're going to take it as not constructive criticism. They're just take it as criticism. But that's what he's talking about. Even if we're going out and trying to help, we're trying to do certain things with people. We're trying to tell them about a situation we're concerned about or anything. They're going to take it as judgment. They're going to take it as, you know what? You think you're better than me or any of this stuff. It's going to not be a good situation. In fact, unless we are, I want to say, blameless, or maybe the word perfect comes up, right? It's never going to be taken well. In fact, they might not say it, right? They might be polite and say, oh, thank you for telling me. But in the back of their mind, they're like, yeah, but you got this going on. You got this going on. You want telling me about what's going on? That it's never a good situation. And that's why there's an exclamation mark right there. Even in the King James, it's an emphasis on the word hypocrite, Because that's exactly what the Sadducees, the Pharisees, the religious elite, the kings and rulers were guilty of. They were guilty of. They had a right to be able to levy judgment on people when they weren't given that right. There was a certain tribe that was appointed as judges in the whole kingdom, right? They had the right and responsibility to offer sacrifices for when sins committed against God's law were recognized and they were trying to be atoned for. Never in there did it ever say that they were to create a bunch of rules and to start punishing people for that. In fact, that's exactly what they could apply. What Jesus is trying to show here is that he was turning everything on its head. He's saying, you know what? All these things that you guys are doing, they're not in love of God. They're not trying to promote me or build me up or build up other people. In fact, you guys are trying to tear down each other. And because you guys are trying to tear down each other, that's why you guys aren't getting ahead. That's why you guys aren't progressing. And how do we know that? Because he goes on and he tries to teach the disciples. So later on in Matthew, it says in Matthew chapter 12, and it's a really, really good illustration about how we should recognize when there are good things being done and who we should follow. In verse 33, it says, Matthew chapter 12, verse 33, it says, either make the tree good and its fruit good, or make the tree bad and its fruit bad, for the tree is known by its fruit. He says, brood of vipers. He's talking to the Pharisees that were following him around at the time. So how can you speak good things when you are evil? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. A good man produces good things from his storeroom of good, and an evil man produces evil things from his storeroom of evil. I tell you that on that day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. He's making a point here. He's even telling the people that were talking about, they were accusing him of doing these things that they were seeing, these miracles. They were accusing him of working for the devil. They were working for Beelzebub and the demons and all that. He said, you do this, but you do it by the spirit of Beelzebub. And he goes and he counters them. He says, if I was doing that for him, why would I cast out my own kind? And then he talks about being a house divided, and there's a bigger message in that passage right there. But he goes on, he says, you know what? You can recognize good things because good things produce good things, right? Whether that's people, places, or entities such as God and Satan, right? He says, you're going to recognize it by the fruit that they produce. He says he goes on to say what people can do. He says a good man produces good things from his storeroom of good, because that's all he's capable of. There's a place, a storage area that he's taken from, and because it's good, that's all he's going to be able to give is good things. Same way on the other side. An evil man produces evil things because that's all he has stored up. And so when this can be more relevant, again, in the Sermon on the Mount, when he was talking about store your treasures up in heaven, store those things that are good for you with the good storeroom, because if you put faith in those things that are materialistic things here on earth, you're going to do whatever you can to keep a hold of that, right? And it's not even yours; it's the world's. He's made you a holy replica of himself. And so there's no way that you could actually really grasp a hold of and own anything that's in this world, because you're not of this world. And that's Paul talks about that all throughout the First Corinthians, the first letter to the church of Corinth, right? And what Jesus is talking about here, he says, I tell you on that day of judgment, talking about judgment again, he says, I tell you on that day of judgment, people will have to account for every careless word they speak, right? In the Old Testament, it talks about watching your tongue because only bad things can come from the tongue. You have to be able to keep a hold of those thoughts that come up when we're being tested, when we're being tempted, when we're going through trials, when we're going through a lot of hard times, right? Because we're going to want to lash out. It's our human nature. It's our human nature. We were born in this world and we've seen really, really bad things that can influence us. And we could say really, really mean things. Or we can try to replace those mean things with good things, what God has taught us. It says you're going to have to account for every word, every careless word you speak. For by your words you will be acquitted. The acquitted part is pretty easy. All you have to do is recognize that Jesus is Lord and Savior, that he was sent by God to die and pay for our sin debt, and that he was able to not only pay for that, die on that cross, but he rose and conquered even death. That's all we have to recognize. That's all we have to believe in, that he did all that, that God sent him to do that, and that we can have an everlasting life, because this world isn't it. This world isn't where we are going to reside and belong, right? It's in heaven is where he's made us a brand new world. And then he's going to come back again for us. That will acquit you. That will, when you're in that judgment seat, believing in that God was gracious enough that he gave us a last chance of the purest offering that he could to pay for all the stuff that we've done bad in the past, even today, and even in the future, right? That he's paid for that he atoned for that. That's what's going to get you past them pearly gates when you have to account for what you've done, what you have to answer for. So, but if you don't, it says, by your words you will be condemned. If you don't say those things, or if you try to put yourself in there, and this is what Paul talks about when he talks about works, when he says that we're going to be saved by, or people think that they're going to be saved by the works that they do, the work that they done on here on earth, and all those things. There are good things. There are good things, of especially spreading the gospel and telling everybody about Jesus Christ. But there are things that don't matter, and you can't replace Jesus with those things. He says, by your word you will be condemned. Now, I had a really, really, really good experience this past few days with this. And so who here has had to answer to jury duty? Those of you online, share if you've had to answer to jury duty. I've had to go up to the county courthouse because I've never really left Pawnee County. I had to go up to the county courthouse twice now. First time was, again, after all that stuff had happened, a few years later, I got this crazy letter in the mail that said, you have to report Pawnee County Courthouse. I was like, what in the world is this? What did I do? I said, you've been selected for jury duty. I was like, oh, well, that's cool. You know, and they make it seem cool in the TVs and all the television series and movies and all that. Maybe it'd be really cool. No, it wasn't cool. In fact, they were a little bit quicker back in the day. So we all bunched in. There was, 50, 60 of us in there scrunched in that little courtroom. And then they did the name calling and then all that type of stuff. It was a really long and boring process. I got selected to stand up there in the jury box. I don't know how. And I got off, though, because I got selected. They had the other people out there. But then they started questioning us, the lawyers, and I didn't know that was part of the process. The lawyers started questioning us about what we knew about the case, what we knew about the defendants, the witnesses, and just by chance, I knew one of the witnesses. I had actually been, it wouldn't say it was like a personal close friend, but I was playing paintball with them, and this whole D-Day thing and everything. You know, I was actually. I call them good friends, but I didn't know anything other than that he was on the drug task force, and they were part of the law enforcement around the county and stuff like that. And it was kind of cool because I would always say, me and my buddy would actually beat them in our paintball matches because they're supposed to have some kind of special operations training and all that, and me and me and my buddy would wipe the floor with them. But I knew him. So when the witness list, they was reciting all that, I was like, hey, I know that guy. So I used that. I used that excuse. I said, anybody know the witnesses? I was like, yeah, I know the gentleman so-and-so. And they asked me if I could render a judgment, or if that would be, if I would be partial, if I could be impartial or partial to the stuff that was going on. And me, obviously, you have to be, in my whole line of work, even at a young age, there was things that would come at us, but I would have to be impartial. I would have to actually be like a judge and, weigh the facts as they were presented. I wouldn't try to give any partiality to anybody. So I was like, they had to ask me that. I was like, yes, I can still do that. I still got excused though. They asked me to leave because my relationship I was like, yes. I had my whole life, my whole career, 2 weeks, no, it was actually a month ago. I got another letter in the mail that said, you've been selected for jury duty. It looks all fancy now with a barcode that you can scan and all kinds of stuff. I was like, well, it was boring last time. Hopefully, I don't get selected this time, because I got a lot of stuff I'm doing. I don't want to be tied up in doing other things. I got, there's a big training that our tribe is trying to do with all of our employees. And I signed up on Friday. I was like, I can't let this, I can't miss that training, because they're really, wanting us all to do it. And I can't really do it any other day. So I get selected for the jury box. They ask us the questions. And then both the counsel sit down and say they passed the jury for selection. I'm like, what? Dang it. And there was 5 people that didn't show up. I was the last one to be called up, and there was 5 people ahead of me that didn't show up. I was blaming those 5 people. I was like, if those people showed up, I would have been, because they didn't get rid of any of us. I was like, if those 5 people showed up, I wouldn't be up here right now. So I said, well, there's 19 of you, so we're going to have, each party reduce the number or whatever. I was like, okay, I got another chance. So I knew one of the witnesses again during the questioning. I was like, okay, maybe that play in my favor. Then they started roll calling. I got selected, number 5. In my little jury box, I was up there in the seat. I was like, oh, man, this is really going to happen. They called 13 of us. I was like, oh, okay, well, one's the alternate. When do they tell the alternate? Well, we won't tell the alternate until the verdict reading. I don't know if you guys have, there's a lot of stuff that goes in this jury. It's not just as simple as showing up and then sitting in the box. It's kind of wild. And then they tell you all the instructions. Don't look at the case, don't talk to the people. And that's a given, right? Don't, you're wanting to hold your judgment until you've seen all the facts, till they've presented all the evidence to you. I'm like, oh man. Okay. So the case goes through, and we render our verdict. And then I get curious. I know I went right past all that. It was a civil case. It was an insurance claim and all kinds of stuff. Anyways, I get curious about the case because there was some crazy stuff that was presented to you. You do get to hear some interesting things, right? Our court system is I don't want to say abused. They try to protect it from abuse, but it's abused. That's a simple term for it. It's abused for a lot of different things. Anyways, I get curious about it after we, are done. We're done after 2 days. So I go back and look. I look at the case and all the filings, and you can see that because all of our court records are online here in Oklahoma. I don't know if any other states are like that, but you can go and look, and it's pretty cool. Because during this case, I seen this one deal, and it was about 2 years ago. And it said it was a offer to confess judgment by the defendant. So usually these insurance things, they don't make it to jury trials. I've heard of insurance claims going to jury trials, but this one it made it all the way to jury trial. But here, about 2 years ago, there was an offer to settle officially that was done through the court. So they were probably having like little conferences here and there about, hey, you did this or whatever. But the defendant felt it was good enough to be able to offer judgment and get this case settled apparently by the court for X amount of dollars. And I was like, wow. The jury, we found we found in favor of the defendant. So the plaintiff spent the last 3.5 years trying to get this case, trying to get a judgment in their favor, and they were offered an olive branch. They were offered a sum of money beforehand. And now, because the defendant did that, the plaintiff now has to pay for all the lawyer's court costs after that date because they offered it up as an olive branch. And what I want to take from all that is that log and that spec, that illustration. When we're rendering judgment on somebody, right? When parties go to court, they have unsettled business. And one of them is making judgment on the other, saying, you did this and therefore you owe me this. There's a wrong and you have to right it. And most of the time the defendant's like, well, yeah, I don't believe so. But sometimes the defendant's also, but you did this wrong as well. Well, both of them, in this case, the defendant came out on top, I guess you could call it, but she had to be drugged through all this nonsense for 3.5, almost 7 years actually, because the way the court, the stuff ran or whatever, it was a case like 6 years ago, and they're just now getting to it. Or it was an activity 7 years ago. It was just now getting resolved 6 years later, and it's crazy because people didn't want to look in their own eye, look in their own way about things. And now that's taken it a little bit further with a court case, because again, our court system is supposed to be protecting against abuse and all that type of stuff. But if they had just maybe took a little time, examined themselves, and then said, hey, you know what, let's figure this out amongst ourselves instead of taking it to the judge. That's what I want to caution all of us against. You know what? It's not in your judgment that you have to worry about. It's what God is judging you on. And what he's judging you on isn't things that we could maybe see in our perspective that are always good. In fact, we get there's a comment out there, no good deed ever goes what is it? Something about unpunished. No good deed ever goes unpunished. There's a lot of times we try to do good things, but then the opposite happens. And that's what Jesus was talking about, Sermon on the Mount. You know what? Make sure you're taken care of first before you go and start laying judgment on other people. And how you do that is examine yourself. Take the log out of your own eye. Fix what's wrong with you first before you go and you try to help somebody else out. And more so, before you get to that judgment seat, the tribunal of God, what the 2 Corinthians was writing about, right? Make sure that you've been washed clean of all of your sins. And there's only one way to be able to be washed clean, and that's with the blood of Jesus Christ. There's only one way to be able to get inside the gates, and that's to be able to put him in your spot, to be able to recognize that the sacrifice that Jesus made is the only way to be able to atone for all of that sin, for all of those things that you've done, and those good things that you've done, right? Because it was God that was working through you. You can't say that you did that on your own. And that's where the words, you'll be acquitted by your words, and you'll be condemned by your words. And so, I just wanted to share that little bit about judging and being judged and all those types of things. Thought it was a really, really good experience. If you guys, I don't recommend it. If you get called for jury duty, don't expect that you're going to enjoy it. But it was really, really interesting. Part of our process, what makes our country great here, why we send people to fight overseas for us and defend our homeland and all that type of stuff, is because we have a great system that allows everything to be heard first, allows a chance to be able to atone for these things. But there's only one thing that can atone for all of our misdoings, misgivings, our mistakes and all of that. Even the things that we've done intentionally. And that's Jesus Christ when he died on that cross. He rose again that third day. And so hopefully you put your faith and love in him, that you commend your soul to him to take care of. And so that on that day when you have to account for all the things that you've done in this realm, right, that you're able to pass on to go see your mansion that he's built for you. So, any questions, comments? All right. Well, we're going to go, and for those of you online, we're going to go into our time of prayer. And so we're going to end on this part. We'll be back. You can catch us on the radio. I can't remember what the FM station is. 100.7, something like that. Or 1600 AM KUSH. What is it? They have an FM station now too. I forgot what it is. It's like 10, I don't know. AM. And then you could get the TuneIn app and you can catch us online at 11 Saturday mornings. And then we'll be back here in church. Come and join us. We'll start Sunday school at 10 and main worship service will start at 11. So until next time, we'll see you later.